All right, well, the Supreme Court justices are likely in for a case of Obamacare deja vu. Today, a three-judge panel at the Fifth Circuit heard arguments in New Orleans on the constitutionality of the Affordable Care Act after a Texas judge ruled last December to strike down the law. Now, it could take months to get a ruling from the panel made up of two GOP nominees, one Democrat nominee. And no matter who wins or loses, this case is likely going right back to the nation's highest court, possibly right in the middle of next year's presidential election. Both sides of the aisle are gearing up for that.
Don't let President Trump fool you, America. Donald Trump and the Republicans want to take away your health care.
I think the important thing for the public to know is there's nobody in the Senate not in favor of covering pre-existing conditions. Nobody. And if that were under any of these scenarios to go away, we would act quickly on a bipartisan basis to restore it.
Well, the law is still being enforced right now as this legal battle plays out. So all kinds of legal issues breaking tonight, from Obamacare to that citizenship question. The Trump administration would like to get back onto the census, return it there. Tonight's Legal Eagles, National Security Attorney Bradley Moss and former Deputy Assistant Attorney General John Yoo. Great to have both of you with us tonight.
Good evening, Shannon.
Shannon. Okay, so John, the Supreme Court did not tell the administration they cannot have this question on the census. They said they didn't agree with the reasoning behind it. At least the majority didn't. But they didn't say there's no way this kind of question can end up on the census. So now what? We hear, the Attorney General saying we're going to take action. You'll know in the next few days. What do you predict?
Well, first, Shannon, you're completely right about the court. In fact, I would say more strongly than that. The court actually said it would be legitimate to ask the citizenship question on the census so long as the administration had a valid reason. And so the court actually invited Trump to take it at its word and to try to put the question back on again. What matters is how you do it, the process. And what the court said was that it felt that Secretary Ross, Secretary of the Commerce Department, had come up with a contrived reason. But suppose the president just says, look, we need to know how many citizens versus aliens there are in the country and what geographies for purposes of law enforcement, immigration enforcement, and public services. That seems to me a legitimate reason. The real question is not whether it's legal, it's whether there's enough time to get this done before the census has to be printed.
Well, and Bradley, that during the arguments, there was a lot of evidence of other countries and other places where the citizenship question has been used. And for decades and decades that it was used here in the United States, Justice Kavanaugh, during the oral arguments, said this: the United Nations recommends that countries ask a citizenship question on the census, and a number of other countries do it. Spain, Germany, Canada, Australia, Ireland, and Mexico ask a citizenship question. So do you argue still, Bradley, that it should not be included?
Well, look, this is governance by chaos. This is one of the most basic examples of how the Trump administration can't do the simple things. John is probably right, and the Supreme Court more or less did lay it out in their ruling. If this had been handled properly, if the Commerce Department and the Secretary had done this right and they had coordinated with DOJ properly, this would have been fine. They would have gotten it on the census, and the court would have allowed it. But they messed up the bureaucratic details. And because of that, because they had made it very clear that there was a June 30th drop-dead date, that they had to get these forms printed, they've got a problem now. They are now trying to find a way to say we can still get this thing done after that drop-dead date. That's why they're trying to get new lawyers in there to try to provide new explanations.
Well, and John, what do you make of this today? The federal judge saying, no, you can't swap out the entire legal team and put in a new team. There were questions about why the DOJ decided to do that. Some folks thought that maybe they were fatigued. They didn't want to go with whatever new plan the Attorney General or DOJ was going to come up with. But today the judge says no. I mean, the attorneys who argued this case are staying on the case.
If I were a judge and I wanted to give President Trump more ammunition to claim judicial bias, this is exactly what I would do. Because the swapping in of lawyers is a ministerial thing. I've never really heard of a case where the government wasn't allowed to change lawyers. The government changes lawyers on cases all the time. To try to throw a wrench in something as ministerial and obviously technical and easy as this, to me, that's like just waving a red flag and saying, go ahead, rush to the appeals court, rush to the Supreme Court, because the district court judge here is being intransigent and is revealing, I think, unfortunately, bias, because he should just let the government have the best lawyers that it wants to and get to the merits of the case.
Okay, Bradley, a red flag to take executive action, an executive order, something else through the Justice Department, Commerce?
Yeah, I mean, we're all kind of waiting to see what this mystery option, this resolution is that the Attorney General is referencing. Everyone's expecting an executive order, a presidential memorandum of some sort, which probably, you know, all things being equal, you know, 51-49 kind of, you know, odds here would survive scrutiny from the court if the president made it, you know, issued it directly from him. You know, but one thing I just want to, you know, respectfully disagree with Professor Yoo there on the issue of swapping out the lawyers. The reason there's a problem here, the reason I think the judge has concerns is because the factual assertions, the explanations provided to the court, the ethical considerations, they're going to come into play here about what the Justice Department lawyers told the court about the drop-dead date and about the factual details behind everything. That's where I think the judge is concerned about just bringing a new legal team to say, oh, here's our brand new explanations, never mind what was previously told to the court.
Well, we all stand by to wait to see what action this administration has planned. And gentlemen, you'll probably be back to debate that when it happens too. Bradley and John, thank you both.
Have a good night.